There is a very specific kind of heartbreak that does not look dramatic from the outside. No screaming. No slammed doors. No final goodbye that gives you something clean to grieve. Just a slow disappearance. A delayed reply. A colder voice. A distance you can feel but cannot prove. And you sit there trying to understand how someone who once looked at you like you were home can suddenly make you feel like you are too much for asking to be loved in a consistent way. That is the wound. Not just that they pulled away, but that they made you question whether your need for closeness was the problem. And if you are the empath in this cycle, you know exactly what happens next. You do not just miss them. You study them. You replay every text, every pause, every shift in tone. You become emotionally hypervigilant. Your body turns into an antenna, scanning for danger, scanning for hope, scanning for one small sign that says, no, it is okay, they still care. Because for you, connection is not casual. It is sacred. You do not love halfway. You feel people from the inside. You notice what they do not say. You sense what they cannot name. And somewhere in your life, maybe very early, you learn that love is not just something you receive. It is something you earn by understanding, by softening, by staying. So when an avoidant pulls away, it does not just trigger sadness. It triggers purpose. You want to rescue the connection. Repair the rupture. Say the perfect thing. Become softer, calmer, easier, less needy, less emotional, less human. You tell yourself they are just scared. Just overwhelmed. Just wounded. And maybe they are. But here is the brutal truth. Your empathy can become self-abandonment when it keeps excusing what is breaking you. That is the part no one wants to say out loud. Because it feels noble to be the one who understands. It feels spiritual to hold space. It feels powerful to be the person who loves deeply enough to stay patient through someone else's confusion. But if your love requires you to silence your own pain so they do not feel pressured, that is not emotional maturity. That is a trauma bond wearing the perfume of compassion. And this is why the empath avoidance cycle is so painful. It is not just chemistry. It is not just timing. It is not even just attachment styles. It is two nervous systems accidentally locking into each other's deepest wounds. One person fears abandonment so they move closer. One person fears engulfment so they move away. And both of them call the resulting chaos love. The empath feels the distance and panics. The avoidant feels the panic and shuts down harder. The more you reach, the more trapped they feel. The more they withdraw, the more desperate you become. And neither of you is responding to the present moment anymore. You are both responding to old pain. That is why the cycle feels larger than the relationship itself. Because it is. When someone avoidant starts feeling emotionally close, their nervous system does not always register it as safety. Sometimes it registers it as threat. Not because you are threatening. Not because your love is wrong. But because intimacy asks them to stay present in places where they learned to leave themselves a long time ago. Real closeness means exposure. Need. Dependence. Uncertainty. And for an avoidant nervous system, those things can light up the amygdala like an alarm. The body floods with stress. Cortisol rises. Their chest tightens. Their thoughts get louder. They begin to feel watched, expected, responsible for someone else's emotions. Even tenderness can start to feel like pressure when your system associates closeness with losing freedom, losing control, losing air. So they do what their body has practiced for years. They detach. They intellectualize. They go numb. They say they need space, but what they often mean is, my nervous system cannot process this much intimacy without interpreting it as danger. And the tragedy is that while they are pulling away to regulate themselves, you are collapsing in the opposite direction. Because your body is reading their distance as confirmation of your oldest fear. Not chosen. Not enough. Too much. So now your amygdala lights up too. Your cortisol rises too. Sleep gets weird. Appetite changes. You reread conversations at midnight. You feel a tiny dopamine hit every time their name appears on your phone, and then a crash when the message feels flat, delayed, or emotionally unavailable. This is why the cycle is addictive. It is not just emotional. It is chemical. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful hooks in human psychology. When warmth is inconsistent, the brain becomes obsessed. Not because the love is deeper, but because unpredictability makes the reward system grip harder. The same way a gambler keeps pulling the lever, part of you keeps waiting for the version of them that felt open, vulnerable, present. You keep chasing the original high of connection, trying to get back to the moment when they seemed sure. And that is where empaths often get trapped. You mistake emotional intensity for emotional truth. You think, if it hurts this much, it must mean this much. But pain is not proof. Longing is not proof. Your ability to feel someone deeply does not mean they have the capacity to meet you there. Still, this is where I want to be careful because avoidants are often misunderstood too. They are not always cold. They are not always manipulative. And no, they did not necessarily stop caring. That is the part that confuses you most, because you can feel that they care. You can see it in the way their voice softens when they forget to guard it, in the way they come back after distance, in the way they linger even when they cannot fully stay, in the way they watch you when they think you are not looking, in the way they miss you but cannot tolerate what missing you awakens in them. They did not stop caring. They got overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by closeness. Overwhelmed by vulnerability. Overwhelmed by the emotional responsibility that intimacy seems to demand from them. Overwhelmed by the silent terror that if they fully let you in, they will disappear inside your needs and lose access to themselves. So they create distance not because there is nothing there but because there is too much. Too much feeling. Too much exposure. Too much risk. And that truth is both comforting and dangerous. Comforting because it tells you that you are not crazy. Dangerous because it can keep you stuck. Because once you know they are overwhelmed rather than indifferent, you start using that insight against yourself. You become even more patient. Even more understanding. Even more willing to tolerate crumbs because you know the pain under their behavior. But understanding someone's wound does not obligate you to live inside it. Let that sink in. Understanding is not consent. Compassion is not a contract to keep bleeding quietly. And this brings us to the one concept that changes everything in this dynamic. Silence. Not punishment. Not games. Not icy detachment. Silence as non-reactivity. Silence as self-return. Silence as the moment you stop feeding the pattern with your fear. Because the empath's deepest mistake is not loving too much. It is reacting too quickly to distance. The minute you feel them slip, you rush to close the gap. You send the extra text. You explain your heart more clearly. You try to make your pain understandable enough that they will finally respond with tenderness instead of retreat. But in doing that, you remove the very thing that would force the pattern into the light. Absence. See, avoidants survive on emotional control. Not always consciously. But they regulate closeness by deciding when to approach and when to disappear. And as long as they know your energy will still be there waiting, warm and available and emotionally tracking them, they never have to fully confront the impact of their withdrawal. Your constant presence softens the consequences of their distance. Your over-explaining rescues them from having to feel the loss. Your emotional labor keeps the bond alive even when they stop tending to it. But when you become silent in a grounded way, something shifts. Not because silence manipulates them. Because silence reveals them. Now there is space. Now there is uncertainty. Now there is no emotional cushion protecting them from your absence. And for the first time, they have to feel what your presence was doing for them. Your check-ins. Your softness. Your availability. Your emotional warmth. Your quiet devotion. They were regulating themselves against it, yes. But they were also being nourished by it. And when it disappears, the system notices. This is the part people rarely understand. Avoidants often feel the loss after the pressure is gone. Not in the heat of conflict. Not while you are crying, asking, reaching, trying to solve it. In those moments, their system is too flooded with threat. They just want out. But later, in the silence, when the demand is gone and the room inside them is no longer crowded by your pain, another feeling creeps in. Emptiness. Then curiosity. Then memory. Then longing. And suddenly the person who seems so unaffected starts checking your profile. Replaying your voice. Wondering why you stopped reaching. Thinking about the warmth they could always count on. Missing not just what you gave them but how you made them feel about themselves. Safe without being forced. Seen without being cornered. Loved without having to earn it. That is when the power begins to move. Not because you are trying to make them chase. But because you are no longer chasing. Do you understand how radical that is? For someone who has spent their whole life equating love with pursuit, calming your own nervous system is a revolution. Imagine it. You reach for your phone and instead of sending the message, you breathe through the panic. You feel the ache in your chest and instead of translating it into another paragraph they will not know how to hold, you let the wave move through your body. You stop monitoring their energy. You stop making their confusion your responsibility. You stop trying to rescue someone from the intimacy they themselves are fleeing. And in that stillness, something sacred happens. You begin to come back to yourself. The nights are still hard at first. Of course they are. Your body has been trained to associate their distance with emergency. So at first, silence feels like withdrawal. Like free-falling. Like you are betraying love by not reaching. But if you stay with it, if you let the nervous system complete the feeling without acting on it, the panic begins to loosen. You realize you can survive not being chosen in the exact way you hoped. You realize your worth does not vanish just because someone emotionally unavailable could not hold your depth. You realize that your tenderness was never the weakness in this story. Your fear was. Your fear of losing them. Your fear of being misunderstood. Your fear that if you stopped overgiving there would be nothing left. But there is something left. And once you start standing inside your own energy again, the dynamic changes in ways that are almost eerie. The avoidant senses the shift. Maybe they do not have language for it. Maybe they would never admit it. But people can feel when they are no longer being emotionally chased. They can feel when access to you is no longer guaranteed. They can feel when the person who once revolved around them has returned to their own center. That is when the texts become a little more frequent. That is when the just checking in message appears. That is when the memory of you becomes louder than the relief of distance. That is when dopamine starts working in reverse, because now the uncertain reward is no longer you waiting for them. It is them wondering if you are still there. And that uncertainty can make them obsess in the very way you once obsessed over them. But this is where the warning comes in. Because the moment they return is the moment most people break the pattern. They mistake reappearance for transformation. They think, finally now they see my value. Now they are ready. Now all the pain meant something. Maybe. But maybe not. Sometimes avoidants come back because they miss access, not intimacy. Sometimes they miss regulation, not responsibility. Sometimes they feel the loss of your energy, but they have not actually built the capacity to stay open when closeness returns. So if you greet every return with instant emotional availability, the old pattern restarts with a fresh coat of hope. That is why your power is not in making them miss you. Your power is in becoming someone who no longer confuses being missed with being met. Those are not the same thing. Someone can crave your warmth and still be unable to love you safely. Someone can think about you every day and still not have the emotional maturity to stop hurting you. Someone can feel deeply and still act in shallow ways. You have to stop being seduced by hidden feeling. Look at behavior. Look at consistency. Look at whether their nervous system is actually learning a new language, or whether it is just returning to an old source of comfort. Because this journey was never meant to turn you into someone colder. It was meant to turn you into someone clearer. Clear enough to know that love without safety will always feel like withdrawal. Clear enough to know that chemistry can coexist with incompatibility. Clear enough to know that just because you can understand someone's patterns does not mean you are supposed to live inside their unfinished healing. And maybe the deepest shift of all is this. You stop identifying as the one who waits. You stop seeing yourself as the compassionate container for people who cannot hold themselves. You stop believing your gift is how much pain you can tolerate without leaving. You stop calling it depth when it is really deprivation. And you become someone else. Someone quieter. Someone steadier. Someone whose heart is still soft, but no longer available for emotional chaos dressed up as soul connection. Someone who can feel love without kneeling in front of it. Someone who does not beg for clarity because ambiguity no longer fascinates them. Someone who no longer needs to be chosen by a wounded person in order to believe they are worthy. That is the identity shift. Not, I finally made them chase me. But, I no longer abandon myself to keep someone emotionally comfortable. That is power. Real power is not getting the avoidant to come back. Real power is becoming the kind of person who can look at their return and ask calmly, not desperately, not romantically, but truthfully, can you meet me now, or do you just miss being loved by me? Feel the difference in that question. One comes from hunger. The other comes from self-respect. And when you live from that place, everything changes. Because now, whether they stay or go, you do not lose yourself. Whether they open or shut down, you remain whole. Whether they finally understand your value or never fully grasp what they lost, your worth is no longer on trial. You are not powerful because someone difficult finally wanted you. You are powerful because you stopped trying to prove that your love was worth holding. It always was. The wrong nervous system just did not know what to do with it. So if you are in that silence right now, if your chest is aching and your mind is spinning and part of you still wants to send one more message just to be understood, hear this like a hand on your shoulder. Do not run after what only recognizes your value in your absence. Do not keep translating your soul to someone committed to misunderstanding closeness as pressure. Do not shrink your needs to fit inside another person's fear. Let the silence do its work. Let it expose what they feel. Let it expose what you have been tolerating. Let it detox you from the belief that love must be chased to be real. And then rise differently. Not louder. Not harder. Not more detached. Just more aligned. More honest. More discerning. More devoted to your own nervous system than to the fantasy of saving theirs. Because the empath was never meant to become a martyr. The empath was meant to become wise. And wisdom sounds a lot like peace. It sounds like not reaching from panic. It sounds like not romanticizing inconsistency. It sounds like trusting that what is truly meant for your heart will not require you to betray it. One day you will look back at this cycle and realize the pain was not only about losing them. It was about losing the version of you that kept confusing pursuit with love. And when that version dies, something stronger is born. A person who still loves deeply, still feels intensely, still sees beneath the surface, but no longer mistakes emotional suffering for destiny. No longer mistakes potential for partnership. No longer waits at the edge of someone else's fear hoping to be invited in. You become the safe place you were begging them to be. And from that place you stop chasing. You stop collapsing. You stop performing devotion for people who only know how to receive it in fragments. And finally, beautifully, you remember. You were never too much. You were just giving ocean-sized love to someone who only knew how to hold water in closed hands.